You may know Derek Sloan as a former Conservative MP and the leader of the Ontario Party, but get this, he is now also a published author. His book is entitled Glorious and Free, and it recently debuted, and get a load of this, folks, it's already a bestseller. And joining me now from Belleville, Ontario, is Mr. Sloan himself to discuss his book and other matters. Derek, thanks so much for making time for me, my friend.
Really glad to be here. Thanks a lot, David.
You got it. You know, I love your book's title, Glorious and Free. Yet by the same token, Derek, given recent events in our country over the past few years, our great Dominion doesn't seem all that glorious and free anymore. What say you?
Well, there's no question there's a lot of issues facing Canada, some of which have become publicized as of late in regards to Chinese interference in our electoral process. Of course, this kind of thing's been going on for years. This book is a call to the way that I believe Canada needs to be run. There's a lot of people who will agree with me on a lot of the points here. It's a bit of a roadmap to say, listen, this is where we are, but how can we get to the place where Canada's the best country that it can be?
And I know we can't digest an entire book in the amount of time we have right now, Derek, but what would be maybe, two or three of the major points that you would like readers to take away after reading your book?
Well, politics is for more than politicians. For the country to change, it's going to take Canadians waking up and taking the mantle of leadership on their own shoulders. We've sort of left politics to politicians for too long. We need to take the power back in our country. We need to become informed on the issues. So my book goes through, all the major issues, at least as I see them, and makes complex issues simple so people can understand and get involved themselves.
And, Derek, I tend to believe that the so-called silent majority, they are most likely on side with you. I look at what's in the news cycle these days. Of course, Chinese interference in our elections, which is very disturbing to say the least. Drag queen story hours, a shop teacher at Oakville Trafalgar High School until recently going to school and teaching shop, dressed as a grotesque caricature of a natural woman. And I think, Derek, the stand pat reaction when you raise these issues, well, Justin Trudeau said it himself a couple of weeks ago when the Chinese interference scandal blew, that if you are criticizing a Asian Canadian member of parliament, therefore you are a racist. I mean, this coming from Mr. Blackface himself. Likewise, with the drag queens and that teacher in Oakville, if you criticize them, you are a so-called transphobe. I just find the nature of debate, such as it is these days, Derek, to be woeful. What do you have to say?
Well, I really agree with you. And I was just reading an article today on Global News that was talking about the tremendous increase in rise of hate incidents perpetrated by the far right against LGBT people. And their prime example was, of course, these protests outside of the Drag Time Story Hour. And of course, they didn't mention, one of the main reasons why we're seeing so many more protests is because drag time story hours are proliferating across the country. Like, they didn't even mention, hey, this is a new thing. This wasn't happening 5 years ago. Obviously, very one-sided reporting in the media. But, a lot of average people are really starting to get frustrated. And I think, when you speak to people one-on-one without the media sort of twisting and distorting things, and you explain to them why we're against some of these things, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that's why, conservatives or small c conservatives need to stand up and, have something to say on these issues. If you just let them go, the debate keeps changing and the pot keeps getting hotter.
And, Derek, can you explain or can you theorize why this drag queen story hour has become such a thing? You're right with the 5-year timeline. I remember in 2018, I first came across this in a city not far from you, Kingston, Ontario. They were hosting a drag queen story hour. And I said, what? And now it's almost as though if you're a library and you're not hosting a drag queen story hour. You're the weirdo. So what I just don't understand is that I'm not against drag queens. If you're in a licensed bar and it's people the age of majority watching that, hey, knock yourself out. But this obsession of doing these highly sexualized performances and caricatures in front of minors. Well, first of all, Derek, what parent in their right mind would bring a kid to watch that in the first place?
Well, you raise a really good point. And it's true that drag shows have been associated pretty much since their inception with extreme, sexuality. It is true that these particular stories going on are toned down and not containing, nudity and things like this. But, the fact is that, with that connection to this, do you really want to bring kids into this? I mean, imagine if this was like a story hour with another adult subject, such as guns or drugs or something like that. And they had, fake versions of them there for the kids. And it was kind of like, well, this is just, to show people, to show kids what's out there, to help them understand the diversity that, life offers. I mean, we would be up in arms about it. But because it has to do with, a protected community, people are, at least the media, is ignoring the rationale for why parents would be upset about this. And I think it's an open debate. It is basically a new thing in terms of directing this at kids. And I think we have every right to protest against it and be upset, particularly when it's taking place in a public place that's funded by both of our tax dollars.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest, either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. We rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.